Welcome to the Hindu Daily.
We're diving into a stack of critical sources today, quite a range.
Absolutely. We're covering everything from the science or maybe dubious science behind green firecrackers
Right?
to some really verifiable quantum computing breakthroughs, and of course the ongoing policy battles over H-1B visas.
And that's just the start. We'll also be looking at some major environmental conflicts. There's a tribal rights struggle in Madhya Pradesh.
Yes, that looks serious.
And the slow death, really, of a vital wetland down in Tamil Nadu. Then we finish up with the fascinating economics of GI tags and Indian craftsmanship.
Plenty to get through. Let's kick off with Section 1, the FAQ Deep Dive. First up, Deepavali firecrackers. It feels like we discuss this every year, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. The Supreme Court has weighed in again. They're trying to strike that difficult balance, legalizing these green crackers.
The idea being to tackle the, well, massive pollution concerns.
Exactly.
While also trying to protect the livelihoods of people in the informal firecracker industry. They were hit hard by that 2018 NCR ban.
Right. And the first thing we need to understand is the science, or the claimed science, behind this green label. Because, strictly speaking, it's a bit of a misnomer.
How so?
Well, the scientists who developed them at the Nagpur-based CSR NERI, they actually prefer the term reduced emission fireworks.
Okay.
The goal is to cut particulate emissions, that's PM10 and PM2.5, by a minimum of 30%. That's the claim, anyway.
So how do they actually do that? I mean, how do you make something that explodes fundamentally less polluting?
It's all about chemical reformulation. They've tried to move away from the really harmful traditional compounds, like barium nitrate and antimony.
That nasty stuff.
Pretty much. Instead, the chemical changes focus on three main areas. First, using additives like zeolite.
Right.
Second, incorporating metallic composites for sort of better combustion efficiency. And third, this is crucial, adding water-releasing molecules, often boron-based reagents. They act as dust suppressants.
Right, dust suppressants. Can you give us an example? How does that work in a real cracker?
Sure. Think about the common flower pot firework, the anar. The green version uses water and lime, chemically bound.
Okay.
The idea is when the cracker lights up, this chemically stored water gets released. It wets the dust and smoke particles right as they come out.
So they fall down faster.
Exactly, making them settle on the ground rather than staying airborne. That's the theory. Or take the green swaz bomb, another popular type. That uses up to 72% of a proprietary additive to achieve a similar particulate reduction.
Okay, that sounds, well, plausible in a lab setting. But here's the critical question, isn't it? Does a theoretical 30% reduction actually mean anything in the real world, especially during Deepavali?
That's the million-dollar question.
The Supreme Court itself noted that air quality hadn't really improved much since the 2018 ban, and they kind of used the already terrible air quality as justification for permitting green crackers. It seems counterintuitive.
It does, and that's the huge real-world caveat. Those 30% reduction figures, they are entirely lab-computed.
Yeah.
They haven't been verified under actual atmospheric conditions, with wind, humidity, everything else. And when you think about the pre-festival air quality,
Which is often already hazardous.
exactly,
Yeah.
especially with environmental factors, stubble burning,
Yeah.
you already have sensors hitting over 1,000 micrograms per cubic meter in some places. A 30% cut from firecrackers in that context, you might not even notice it.
So the court's decision sort of implicitly admits the problem is way bigger than just firecrackers.
It seems to.
Okay, from the environment, let's pivot quite sharply to the absolute cutting edge of computation, quantum computing.
Yes, a major development here. Recent papers in Nature from Google using their Willow processor and collaborators, they're claiming a verifiable display of quantum advantage.
Verifiable advantage, meaning they've actually shown it working better than classical supercomputers.
Clearly better, yes, on specific, very technical tasks. To really grasp the how, we need that core concept of quantum computing wave interference.
Right. Can you walk us through that again? The analogy helps.
Okay, think of waves in a pond. If two crests meet, they add up, get bigger, that's constructive interference.
Right.
If a crest meets a trough, they cancel each other out, destructive interference. Quantum computers use this principle with quantum states. By carefully controlling these states, scientists can engineer the interference.
To boost the right answer.
Exactly. They amplify the probability waves associated with the correct answer, while making the waves for the wrong answers cancel each other out. Destructive interference gets rid of the noise.
Okay, that's the principle. So what specific problems did these two big studies tackle to actually prove this quantum advantage?
So the first study looked at optimization problems. They used an algorithm called decoded quantum interferometry, or DQI.
DQI.
Yeah. It uses a quantum version of a mathematical tool called the Fourier transform. It lets them find a good approximation to complex problems like finding the optimal intersection point for a tricky polynomial setup much, much faster than any known classical computer could.
Faster. Okay. And the second study sounded even more abstract, measuring something called quantum scrambling.
It is abstract. Quantum scrambling. Imagine dropping a blob of dark blue dye into a swimming pool. At first, it's concentrated, right?
Yeah.
But quickly, it spreads out, mixes, until the entire pool is just a uniform, very faint light blue. The original information where the dye was dropped is now hidden, smeared across the whole system. That's scrambling.
Okay, information spreading out until it's sort of lost in the noise.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And the researchers needed a way to measure exactly how that information spread and interacted. That measurement is called the out-of-time order correlator, or OTOC.
OTC. So how on earth do you measure something that's deliberately hidden everywhere at once?
Well, they use a really clever trick involving interference and echoes. It's complex, but imagine this. You're in a huge, dark warehouse. Your initial information is like a shout. It bounces around, scrambles everywhere. Then suddenly, there's a sharp metallic kick. Maybe a friend strikes a bell. This kick imprints a tiny specific echo onto every sound wave that happens to hit it at that moment.
Right, like tagging the waves.
Kind of. Now, here's the magic part. They theoretically hit a rewind button. All the sound waves travel backward in time.
Okay.
The normal echoes, the ones that didn't hit the bell, retrace their paths perfectly and cancel themselves out when they return to the source. But those waves that got the metallic imprint, they travel backwards slightly imperfectly because of that kick.
So they don't cancel out completely.
Exactly. What you're left with is a very, very faint, jumbled collection of those metallic echoes. That leftover sound is the OTOC measurement. It tells you precisely how much the original shout spread and interacted before the kick. It's frankly remarkable.
Wow, that is a complex analogy, but it helps visualize it. And the scale of the advantage they demonstrated.
It's genuinely stunning. The Willow processor solved one of these complex scrambling tasks in about 2 hours.
2 hours. And a classical supercomputer.
Researchers estimate it would take the world's second fastest supercomputer over 3 years to simulate the same thing.
3 years versus 2 hours. That's a real advantage.
It's enormous. But, we have to add the usual caveats. This advantage is perspective for now. The specific problem they solved isn't mathematically proven to be permanently hard for all possible future classical computers. Algorithms improve.
Sure.
And the really big next steps are still improving error correction and scaling up, getting thousands of reliable quantum bits or qubits working together perfectly. That remains the massive engineering hurdle for the whole industry.
Still a way to go, but a significant step.
Definitely. And it builds on the fundamental work of people like recent Nobel laureate Michel Devoret. His work underpins these kinds of advances.
Okay, from quantum advantage, let's switch gears again. Back to policy, and one that affects many of our listeners. H-1B visas. There's been a crucial clarification from USCIS about that controversial $100,000 processing fee.
Yes, this clarification was badly needed. The stricter policies announced in September caused quite a bit of panic in industry circles.
I bet. So what's the main clarification?
The key thing is this. That huge fee applies only to new H-1B applications filed after September 21st.
Only new ones.
Right. Critically, current H-1B holders who are just seeking an extension are exempt. And importantly for many, those switching visa categories like international students moving from an F-1 student visa to an H-1B work visa are also exempt.
Okay, that's huge. That removes a massive potential financial barrier for thousands of foreign students already studying in the U.S. who hope to work there afterwards.
Absolutely. It was seen as potentially crippling for them and for the companies wanting to hire them.
What pushed USCIS to soften the rules? Was it just the outcry?
It was largely driven by massive industry backlash, yeah. Companies argued the fee was cost-prohibitive, especially hitting small and mid-sized businesses that really rely on highly skilled international talent.
And there was legal pressure too, wasn't there?
Yes, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce filed a legal challenge. They argued the fee was simply unlawful and pointed to persistent shortages in critical STEM fields, science, tech, engineering, math, that the domestic U.S. education system just hasn't been able to fill on its own.
USCIS also included a sort of escape hatch, a national interest clause for exceptions.
That's right. There's a provision for extraordinarily rare circumstances. The Secretary of Homeland Security can grant an exemption if the applicant is deemed to serve a clear national interest, or if there's genuinely no American available for that highly specialized role, or, interestingly, if forcing the fee payment would somehow undermine U.S. interests.
Okay, so on the surface, it looks better for current F1 students aiming for an H-1B. But is there a catch? A potential countermeasure we need to be aware of?
There is potentially a very big catch, yes, and it could disproportionately affect Indian students.
How so?
Well, alongside this visa fee clarification, the administration also floated a proposal to cap overall undergraduate international student admissions at 15%.
15% total.
Yes, and critically, with only 5% allowed from any single country.
Ah. So while it might be financially easier to get the H-1B if you're already in the U.S. system as a student?
Exactly. It could become drastically harder for students, particularly from countries like India, which send large numbers, to even get into the U.S. education system in the first place. It could severely shrink the pool of potential H-1B applicants down the line.
That definitely nullifies some of the benefit of the fee exemption, doesn't it?
It certainly could. And immigration lawyers, like those from ALA, the American Immigration Lawyers Association, they've pointed out that while the logistics of who pays the fee got clarified, major structural concerns are still there.
Like the vagueness of that extraordinarily rare circumstances clause.
Precisely. There's still no clear guidance on the standards for that. It fuels fears about future policy shifts, potential disruptions to things like remittances from workers back home, or even impacts on the U.S.'s service trade surpluses, which rely heavily on skilled foreign workers. Still a lot of uncertainty.
Okay, moving on now to our dedicated science section. And we're looking at artificial intelligence making, well, actual scientific discoveries in medicine. Google's launched something called the C2S Scale Foundation Model.
Yes, C2S Scale, built on their GEMMA model. It's designed, they say, to understand the language of individual cells.
Language of cells. What does that mean in practice?
Well, this foundation model, Cell Two-Sentence Scale 27B, it was trained on truly vast amounts of data, patient data, cell line data, and its first big achievement was generating a novel hypothesis for cancer therapy. And crucially, this hypothesis was then experimentally validated.
Okay, that sounds significant. What was the specific suggestion the AI made?
It suggested a new application for an existing drug called silmetacertib. Now, this drug is already in clinical trials for some cancers.
Right.
But the AI proposed a new use, using it to actually improve the immune system's ability to spot and target nascent tumors, very early stage ones. This wasn't a known mechanism or application.
And they tested it in the lab and it worked.
It was validated in lab settings, yes.
The big advantage here isn't just the idea itself, though. It's the speed, right? I mean, normally finding a new use for a drug, that takes researchers months, maybe years, and costs billions in R&D.
That's the key metric everyone's excited about. The AI scanned the literature, crunched the data, and came up with this novel suggestion in a fraction of the time. However, there's always a however, isn't there?
Usually is in science.
A systems biologist, Dr. Sunil Laxman, offered a really important, nuanced perspective. He called the result very good, not great.
Interesting. Why only very good, not great? What's the distinction for a biologist?
He pointed out, quite rightly, that the AI didn't discover entirely new biology, it didn't uncover a fundamental mechanism nobody knew about, and it didn't suggest something that, theoretically, a highly trained, very focused biologist couldn't have eventually figured out, given enough time and resources.
Okay, so it accelerated discovery, but didn't necessarily break entirely new ground conceptually.
That seems to be his assessment. And perhaps more importantly, for practical application across science, he noted that the average research lab simply doesn't have the kind of access to vast chemical compound libraries that a giant like Google does.
Right.
So replicating this type of AI-driven discovery where you need to screen thousands of compounds based on an AI suggestion is still a limiting factor for most researchers. Accessibility remains an issue.
That's a fair point. But the capability itself is still pretty revolutionary. The source material mentioned how these large language models, LLMs, are trained. They can figure out biological rules without being explicitly told them.
Yes, that's one of the fascinating aspects. It's similar to how top chess-playing AIs learned. The models aren't given a textbook of biology rules. Instead, they're essentially rewarded for making predictions that turn out to be successful in matching the data and punished for failures.
So they deduce the underlying patterns and rules themselves.
Exactly. They infer the hidden rules of biology through trial and error on a massive scale. And this potential isn't limited to biology or medicine. We're seeing it in mathematics, too.
Ah, yes. Professor Siddhartha Gaggil's perspective was mentioned. He sees AI models today functioning at the level of a skilled mathematician.
That's his view. And we saw that, didn't we, with the OpenAI model that simulated achieving a gold medal standard at the International Mathematical Olympiad.
Though, important context, those are still high school level problems, extremely difficult ones, but not like, solving the Riemann hypothesis yet.
Not yet, no. But Professor Gadgil's key point is that these models show no signs of plateauing. Their capabilities seem to be constantly growing and maybe haven't even been fully tapped yet. The field of mathematics itself is apparently quite divided on how quickly to adopt these tools, but the future potential impact, it seems undeniable. Massive.
All right, let's move into our spotlight section now. First up, we're looking at a deeply concerning local conflict. It's about land, tradition, and rights playing out in Madhya Pradesh.
Yes, this is in Binega village, which sits within the Madhav National Park. It involves about 60 families from the Saharia tribe. They're classified as a particularly vulnerable tribal group, a PVTG.
Okay, and the conflict is with whom?
It's with the adjacent Sri Paramhans ashram, which follows the Yatharth Gita teachings.
An ashram and a tribal village. How did this conflict arise? Was it always there?
No, actually, the history, according to the source, was initially quite harmonious. The villagers apparently helped build the original ashram some 30 or 40 years ago, working for fair wages.
So relations were good back then.
Seemingly so, but things deteriorated sharply under new leadership at the ashram. It began to expand, eventually encroaching onto about 11.5 hectares of land that the tribal community traditionally used.
Right, and what legal standing do the Sahara families have in this dispute? Do they have rights to that land?
They absolutely do under Indian law. Critically, under the Forest Rights Act, the FRA of 2006, these families secured individual forest rights titles, or IFRs, back in 2017. That recognizes their generational right to occupy and use that specific land.
Individual rights.
Yes. And on top of that, they also hold community forest rights titles, CFRs, which date back to 2010. That acknowledges the community's collective right to manage and use certain forest resources.
So both individual and community rights. And they were also sanctioned proper houses.
That's right. They were approved for Pukka homes, permanent houses under the government's PM AWAS Grameen housing scheme in 2016.
Okay, so they have IFRs, CFRs, sanctioned housing. With all that legal recognition, how did the conflict turn against them? How did the ashram gain the upper hand legally?
Well, the current Swami leading the ashram launched a counteroffensive. He filed petitions with both the Madhya Pradesh High Court and the National Green Tribunal, the NGT.
On what grounds?
Arguing that the villagers' sanctioned PM AWAS homes were actually unauthorized construction on community land.
Even though they were sanctioned under a government scheme?
Apparently so. And controversially, the NGT actually sided with the ashram in 2019. It directed the removal of the villagers' homes.
Wow, how could that happen?
Well, the villagers appealed, naturally, and their appeal brought to light a significant bureaucratic lapse. It turned out that somehow a former Swami's name had been incorrectly included on the community forest rights title, alongside the Gram Sabha, the village council, which should have been the sole authority.
A technicality, but a crucial one.
A very crucial one. Local officials acknowledged this lapse, and now both that CFR title inclusion and the villagers' original IFR titles are under review.
So it's a mess. And now the Supreme Court's involved, and its observations have created a whole new wave of uncertainty, right? This goes way beyond just these 60 families in Binega.
It really does. The Supreme Court observed what it sees as a fundamental conflict between two key laws. The Forest Rights Act of 2006.
Which grants rights to forest dwellers.
Right, and permits certain non-forestry activities necessary for their livelihood. And the Older Forest Conservation Act, the FCA, from 1980.
Which is much stricter about any development in forest areas.
Exactly. The court's concern seems to be that the FRA, as it's currently written, doesn't explicitly mention or authorize the construction of Pukka housing, permanent brick-and-mortar homes within forest areas, even for rights holders.
So the very legality of building permanent homes under schemes like PMAWAS on land, recognized under the FRA, is now potentially in question.
That seems to be the implication. The real consequence isn't just the immediate fate of these 60 families whose homes are half-built and now stalled. It potentially affects hundreds of thousands of tribal families across India who rely on PMAWAS and similar upliftment programs in forest areas.
This is huge.
It is. Everything is kind of hanging the balance until the union...
Okay, our second spotlight feature tonight turns to another critical environmental issue, this time in Tamil Nadu. We're looking at the Suchindram Eri, or Suchindram Lake, in Kanyakumari.
Yes, this is a really important ecosystem. It's part of a Ramsar site, meaning a wetland of international importance. Historically, it was known as the granary of erstwhile Travancore, incredibly fertile.
And it's vital for wildlife, too.
Hugely important. It's a key stopover point for migratory birds using the Central Asian Flyway, and it's considered a prime heronry, a breeding ground for herons and related birds. But sadly, it's now severely threatened by neglect and degradation.
What are the main threats? The article outlines several.
It's facing really a perfect storm of environmental decay. If we break down the critical threats, the first one is rampant encroachment.
People building too close?
Yes, residential buildings, even cattle shelters, are popping up right along the banks. This destroys the vital mudflats.
Which the birds need.
Exactly. Those mudflats are essential feeding grounds for migratory wading birds. They're just disappearing.
And pollution is a major factor, too, I assume.
Massive. Threat number 2 is the huge unchecked sewage inflow. Basically, the entire sewage output from the nearby Parakai Panchaya and even parts of Nagercoil Corporation flows directly into the lake via a canal called the Parakan Call.
Untreated sewage.
Largely untreated, yes. And that leads directly to the third major problem: eutrophication.
That's nutrient overload, right?
Precisely. All those nutrients from the sewage act like fertilizer, causing rampant, explosive growth of invasive species like water hyacinth and other weeds. They're literally choking the lake.
Reducing the open water.
Yes, restricting the open water areas that birds like pelicans need for landing and feeding.
So encroachment, sewage, eutrophication. What else?
Threat number 4 is ongoing land conversion. Remember those historic paddy fields around the lake?
The granary part.
Exactly. People are still converting those fields for other uses, even though there's apparently a collector's ban in place. That further damages the surrounding ecosystem. And finally, number 5 is just general illegal activity. Unregulated waste dumping, sometimes burning waste near the lake. There's also illegal lotus cultivation, which might sound nice, but it actually disrupts oxygen levels and disturbs the birds. And illegal fishing nets trap birds, too.
It sounds grim. Has this had a noticeable impact on the bird life?
Definitely. The article mentions ornithologists like Robert Grubb, who studied the area years ago. They recorded species like whistling ducks and even nesting pelicans.
And now?
Those species are reportedly no longer seen there. It's a clear indicator of significant biodiversity loss. It's really a tragedy unfolding in a Ramsar protected site.
Is anything being done? Is there any official response?
There are some efforts, but they seem fragmented. The Nagercoil mayor is apparently working on desilting that main sewage channel, the Parakan Call. There's a 40 lakh proposal. The Water Resources Department, WRD, has its own separate proposal and says it's taking action against the illegal lotus cultivators.
Okay, some specific actions.
Yes, and the Forest Department has a 10-year management plan for the area from 2023 to 2033 and has directed the Pollution Control Board to check the sewage intrusion. But the crucial point the article makes is that despite having 2 Ramsar sites in the district, the overall protection and enforcement efforts have been lacking.
So the cumulative threats are just overwhelming the ecosystem despite its protected status.
That seems to be the situation, yes. A lack of unified, concerted action.
Okay, let's transition now into our final section, the magazine deep dive. We're starting with a really insightful piece on geographical indication tags, GI tags. They're meant to protect traditional heritage products, but do they actually protect the artisans' livelihoods?
That's the core question. And the article uses a great example to illustrate the dilemma. Krishwan Kumar, a Dabu block printer in Rajasthan.
Right, the traditional block printing.
Exactly. His traditional, entirely handmade process is slow. He can produce maybe 50 meters of fabric a day, and it fetches around 250 a meter. Meanwhile, machines can mimic the Dabu style. They can churn out 5,000 meters a day and sell it for maybe €80.
Wow, that's a huge difference in scale and price.
It's massive. That price and speed differential makes it incredibly hard for the genuine handmade craft to compete economically. It becomes almost unsustainable for the artisan.
And the GI tag is supposed to be the solution, right? Can you remind us exactly what a GI tag does?
Sure, it's a tag given to goods that originate from a specific geographical area, where a particular quality, reputation, or other characteristic of the goods is essentially attributable to that place, its methods, its environment, its tradition.
Like Darjeeling tea, the first one.
Exactly. That was the first one back in 2004-05. Since then, we've got over 658 goods tagged in India. And the government has ambitious plans. They're aiming for 10,000 tags by 2030.
But here's where the article highlights a critical legal gap, isn't it? Something it calls the Prada effect.
Yes, this is really important to understand. The GI tag system in India is fundamentally a domestic law. It protects the product's name, like Darjeeling tea or Kolhapuri chapels, and its geographical origin.
Okay, name and origin. But what doesn't it protect?
Critically, it does not protect the product's design or style.
Ah, so that's the Prada effect.
Exactly. The example given is that a big international luxury label like Prada could legally create sandals that look exactly like traditional Kolhapuri chapels, copying the design, the aesthetic completely.
And sell them globally.
Yes. As long as they don't actually call them Kolhapuri chapels or claim they were made in Kolhapur, they wouldn't technically be violating India's GI law.
So the law stops someone in, say, Jaipur from making fake Kolhapuris and selling them as Kolhapur.
Right. It stops counterfeit sales claiming the specific origin.
But it doesn't stop anyone, anywhere, from copying the look and mass-producing something similar, which completely undercuts the original artisans anyway.
That's the vulnerability. It protects the name, not the visual identity or the craft technique itself in a design sense. This confusion persists, you know? Think about those disputes like the Rasgulla Wars between West Bengal and Odisha or the international basmati rice debates. It's often about name and origin, less about the intrinsic recipe or style being copied.
So given these limitations, does the GI tag actually provide any real economic benefit? The article did present some success stories.
Yes, despite the limitations, there is compelling evidence of economic uplift in some cases. A study by NABARD, the National Bank for Agriculture and Rural Development, found significant benefits.
Like what?
On average, artisans with GI-tagged products saw their monthly income rise by anywhere from 20% to 75%, and the prices their products could command often increased by 50% to 70%.
That's substantial. Any specific examples?
Yeah, Marayur Jaggery from Kerala.
Oh.
Pre-GI tag, it sold for about 40 euros per kilo. After the tag, the price jumped to 110 per kilo. And in Tamil Nadu, Kubopati Kadalai Mithai, the peanut candy sales reportedly surged from 75 lakh annually to over 2.05 crore. Madurai Mully, the jasmine flower, is projected to cross 35 crore in exports. The tag provides verified authenticity, and often academic institutions help verify that, like with Kodaikanal Malai Pundu garlic. Customers seem willing to pay a premium for that assurance.
Okay, so it can work. But the article stresses that just getting the tag isn't enough. What are the big implementation challenges holding back more universal success?
The single biggest challenge seems to be the lack of a robust, consistent enforcement and certification mechanism after the tag is granted. Ideally, for a GI tag to be truly effective, there needs to be a recognized certification body in the specific geographic area. This body needs to actively confirm that every producer claiming the GI tag is actually adhering to the specific processes and quality standards laid out in the original GI application.
And that rarely exists.
It's apparently quite rare. Without that local certification and quality control, the tag's value can get diluted. Post-registration support, branding, marketing needs are crucial, as NABARD noted, but often lacking.
The article mentioned a positive example, though. TAAFUZ for Pashmina in Kashmir.
Yes, that's presented as a successful model. They apparently created an apex body that vets, certifies, and labels genuine Pashmina products. Critically, they linked adherence to the traditional process with clear economic incentives and benefits for the artisans. That kind of holistic approach seems key.
So it's not just about getting the label, it's about building an entire ecosystem around it, quality control, marketing, business training.
Exactly. Limited awareness among artisans about how to leverage the tag, lack of training in basic business or digital marketing skills, and that enforcement gap. These are the things still restricting many artisans. The legal safeguards need strengthening, perhaps even exploring international partnerships. But the post-tax support system is just as vital.
That discussion about implementation challenges leads perfectly into our final piece. It showcases an entrepreneurial solution to precisely those problems. Varnam Craft Collective.
Yes, this is a really interesting case study. Varnam, founded by Karthik Vaidyanathan, successfully took the traditional GI-tagged Channapatna wooden toy craft.
Which was struggling, right?
It was often struggling, yeah. Seen as maybe a bit outdated, lacking innovation, poor market access, Varnam completely reimagined it.
How did they do that? What's Varnam's model?
Instead of just making the traditional toys, they shifted the focus.
Yeah.
They used the same traditional Channapata lacquerware techniques, but created fun and functional items for modern homes. Things like little wooden owls that double as lamps, or bunny figures that are actually salt and pepper shakers.
Clever, taking the craft skill into new product categories.
Exactly. They started small, working with just 7 artisan families back in 2011. Now they collaborate with over 300 artisan families across 11 different traditional crafts.
That's impressive growth, but Vaidyanathan's assessment of the business side was quite sobering, wasn't it?
It really was. He's very candid in the article. He notes that the craft sector is incredibly working capital intensive. You have to pay artisans up front often, but your sales might come much later.
Right, cash flow is tough.
Very tough. He says the sector rarely attracts venture capitalists for that reason. And despite Varnam's recognition and success, he admits they ran month to month financially for years. It's only really been in the last 3 years that they've achieved sustainable profitability. It highlights just how difficult it is to scale these craft-based businesses ethically.
So how did they manage to build a strong enough brand identity to cut through the competition and actually achieve that sustainability? What was their strategy?
A key part was strategic diversification while keeping Channapatna at the core. They started reproducing Varnam's signature Channapatna motifs, the colors, the patterns onto other products, like block-printed textiles for apparel and home furnishings.
Ah, so extending the brand's visual language.
Precisely. It created a memorable, unified brand identity that went beyond just the wooden items. Channapatna became the heart of the brand, but its style could be applied elsewhere. They also integrated Channapatna components into collaborations, like making the wooden pawns for board games that were embroidered by Lambadi tribal women. Cross-craft collaboration.
Smart. And now they've got some new funding. What's the focus going forward?
Yes, they recently raised a 2 crore seed fund, and their new focus is fascinating. It's on world building and storytelling. They've launched a new collection called Snugglewalas.
Snugglewalas.
Yeah, these are anthropomorphic characters, animal figures, essentially crafted using traditional techniques, but each given a unique personality and backstory. Quirks.
So moving beyond just the object to create an emotional connection.
Exactly that. The goal is to infuse emotion and narrative into the craft motifs, to create a shared world that customers can connect with. You know, maybe this wooden parrot character has a funny quirk like it loves green chilies. It's about bonding the customer to the brand, the story, and through that, to the craft heritage itself. It's moving beyond product to experience.
That approach really highlights the power and value of a craft's unique design language, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Which brings us back to that GI tag limitation we discussed. Given the success of entrepreneurs like Varnam in modernizing the design of traditional crafts, and that critical legal gap where GI tags only protect the name and origin, not the design itself, it raises a provocative question for the future, doesn't it?
It certainly does.
What is the next step for policymakers? Should the international intellectual property framework perhaps evolve? Could there be, or should there be, some way to offer protection for a craft's unique, identifiable design language, that intangible heritage that brands like Varnam are now successfully leveraging? Something for all of us, especially policymakers, to think about.
Thank you for listening.
If you want to provide suggestions, please contact on the Twitter handle given in the episode description. As always, we are eager to hear what our listeners want to be informed about. We wish you a great day